Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. This is Moyna Bass Fishes. I am Jim Moyna, professional bass fisherman. In this video, we're going to talk about the 2024 Bassmaster Open Tournament on Lake Santee Cooper, where the big bass were absolutely out of their minds this week. Specifically, I'm going to talk about my strategy, my approach, how I addressed the 4.5 days of practice, and ultimately how I fell into the water I chose to fish and what I fished it with. So let's get into that. Okay, we are allowed in these Bassmaster Open tournaments 4.5 days of practice. And that gives you plenty of time to not only explore your strengths, but then maybe explore some other options that that are, strong possibilities. So doing a little homework before even showing up here. You got to pay attention to the weather. So the weather trends were important, and it seemed like this tournament could be on the cusp of a spawn type situation, but it would have to be an earlier than the normal spawn from what I can tell for this time of year. So that's in my mind. But also in my mind is just a couple weeks ago they had the Major League Fishing's Bass Pro Tour was here, and their water temperatures, what some of their pros were reporting, were like anywhere from like 55 to 58 degrees. It was kind of what I was hearing from those pros that, they mentioned this in the coverage of the MLF's coverage of the tournament. So yeah, so that's getting into that's definitely a pre-spawn kind of a water temperature, and a heavy warming trend can propel that out of that stage into a more of a pre-spawn spawn kind of a stage. So that was in my mind. So anyways, but also watching that video, you watch the winner of that tournament, Jacob Wheeler, win the tournament fishing brush piles out and away from visible cover. So in a little deeper water, it seemed like anywhere from like 5-6 feet out to 12 feet is what it seems like what he was keen on. So, and of course, I got suckered into, I wouldn't say suckered. I mean, that was kind of my main emphasis, was to maybe explore some of that in the early stages of practice. And then as practice would wear on, I would assess how that went. Then I'd also assess how the weather patterns are developing, what's happening, what's trending with the weather. Is it cooling? Is it warming? Is the water temperature is going up, down, whatever. And it's always, and I wanted to start out there because to me, it's more effort to put together an offshore pattern. It's with the electronics we have today. I run Lowrance, which the winner of that tournament, Jacob Wheeler, he had some Lowrance equipment on his boat that helped him win. So Lowrance makes some good stuff, and using that stuff, using that equipment, this down scan, side scan, forward sonar, that has made offshore fishing way more efficient than what it ever used to be, so that it's not as difficult to break down offshore structure as it used to be, but it still, to me, is more time consuming as compared to just looking at the map, looking at the visible cover up shallow, and breaking down the shallow water just visually with what you see. To me, that's really easy. It's like, for instance, hey, there's a cypress tree right over there in a spawning cove. Maybe I should go cast my bait next to that. It's easy. It's the most efficient type of fishing is shallow water fishing, because you see everything's visible. You see it, you go to it, you cast at it. Whereas offshore, it's more having to idle around to find the stuff with your electronics, mark it, and then reposition, reset up on it, and and further analyze it with electronics from there. But anyhow, so knowing that I can break down the shallow cover easier, and not only that, um, if we're starting to transition into a spawn, that means if I go out there on the first day of practice, the very first day, and go up and start looking in some shallow areas, there may not be anything going on up there. But fast forward 5 days to the first day of the tournament, after a bunch of warm weather, that could be the best spawning cove in the lake practically. So I didn't want to get ahead of myself in that regards either. I didn't want to start eliminating water up shallow that early, because so much can happen. And that's what was happening, was the water temperatures were trending upward, and I didn't want to get caught up in trying to chase that pattern too early, the spawning pattern too early. I didn't want to do that. Instead, I wanted to have some offshore stuff that I could have in my back pocket, and if the shallow stuff never developed, then I'd have this offshore stuff. Well, so what did I experience? I found it extremely difficult to catch fish out of brush piles out here. I couldn't find brush piles that had fish. When I did, I'd catch one and it'd be, like a 15 or 16 inch bass, which in this lake is not really going to be part of any monster bag or any winning bag. So the numbers just weren't there for me, but I hammered away on it for 3 days. I did also, I did make, each day I'd make brief interlopes up shallow just to check things. And I was catching some fish up shallow. I mean, I wasn't, I think the first day I had 4 bites. Next day I had like 5 or 6, and the third day I had like 6 or 7, and half of those bites were coming up shallow, even though I was only spending about 20% of my time shallow in those first 3 days. That was just kind of trying to monitor what was going on. Well, it wasn't looking good. I mean, it was looking like a real grind kind of a tournament thus far, 3 days into it. Now, had I only had 3 days to practice, I would have switched over to shallow water sooner. But with 4.5 days, so I didn't have to make that switch quite as quick. So on day 4 of practice, then I decided it's going to be full-on shallow water fishing, and we're just going to have to just cover water and find productive areas shallow. And it did not take long at all to do that, because the fish were coming in shallow and they were posting up on key places of spawn. And I had an excellent day on day 4. I shook off just about all the fish that I had, but so I didn't know the sizes, but just knowing Santee Cooper and knowing that the fish are just coming in to spawn, that there's going to be plenty of females to be had from some of these bites that I'm having. And what technique was I using up shallow for this tournament? It was a wacky rig with a stick worm. As simple as that. Weightless. I tried some weighted baits. I tried some Nico rig stuff. I tried, that's where you got lightweight lead inserts into the plastics and that. And, maybe that was effective. Maybe it wasn't. In my little bit of practicing out here, it seems like the totally weightless stick worm was doing a little better than the ones with the weight on it. And where you're casting to, where a lot of these largemouths are bedded, setting up their beds, are on the cypress trees. There's tons of cypress trees out here. That's no secret. That's well-established, well-known fact of this type of fishery. And so it's just a matter of trying to find the right cypress trees in the white water, the right depth, the right section of the lake. And it just, it seems like it's hard to go wrong. Um, you can go wrong, but there are plenty of good areas out here, as you know, as the strength of the catches from our competitors in this tournament was proved out. I'm sure a lot of the you know money finishes were spawning bass. I don't know how the leaders are doing it, but I'm sure a lot of the money finishers came off of spawning fish. And you don't see them. The water's too dingy. You don't see these beds. The water's got, heavy color to it. You don't see the beds. You don't see the fish. You're just making blind casts to these cypress trees where you're thinking in your mind, well, this is the right depth, and this is where there's likely, to be a spawning bed. Now, here's a little thing I discovered regarding spawning beds is they seem to spawn in groupings out here, because what I mean by that is I'll fish an area for a while, hitting this cypress tree, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. I might go 25 minutes or a half hour hitting all these different cypress trees. Then all of a sudden, the next 5 or 6 trees I hit, I get a bite. And it's, for whatever reason, there's just like little micro hot sections of bedding activity. And then you'll hit those trees, and then you'll fish for a while again without nothing, and then you'll hit another area where it's this tree's got one, that tree's got one, that one's got one, and you've hit another little micro area of hot spawning activity. So that was kind of interesting to see how that played out. And the other thing, which was to my benefit for breaking this thing down, and I also spent, after day 4 success, day 5, or the half day we have, where we have to be off the water at noon because we have registration and that later in the day, I also spent that half day trying to find more spawning activities. And I would mark on my Lowrance GPS every time I had a bite off a cypress tree, I'd put a dot there. And I'd put it there, and then if I had another bite on the next tree, I'd probably put another one. But then if I had a third bite there, then I wouldn't bother even marking it, because then I know in this zone here, I need to fish all these trees. And not only that, because we're just on the beginning of it, there's going to be more fishing coming in. So just because I did not catch a bite off of this tree that's next to these 2 other trees that I did have a bite, I'm still going to fish this other one in the tournament, because fish seem to be coming. The fish are on the come to the shallows. They're coming into the shallows. So just because this tree didn't have one in practice, well, one might show up there overnight. So that was that mentality. Now, where should I go next with this? Let's see. Let's talk about let's just talk about, let's talk about how the competition days now. So at this point, as I'm thinking about my strategy now, the night before, after all my practice is done, it's become obvious to me, because I was having literally just tons of bites, shallow. Like I mentioned, the first 3 practice days fishing offshore, I was catching, 4, and then like 5 or 6, and like 6 or 7 bites those 3 days. Well, fishing like the third day of practice, literally, I'm sure I had like 25 bites easily. Then that half day, I probably had like another 20 bites in just the half a day. So that's obvious to me. I'm not even going to touch my brush piles, or I did catch one, or maybe where I saw a fish chase a bait, and I pulled it away. I'm like, I'm not going to mess with those, because there's such a surge of fish into these spawning cypress trees that that's a waste of time. I'm going to get way more bites up shallow, catch way more fish, and so that's what I did. I just ignored the offshore stuff. And now it just became what areas what areas do I go to? Well, in a day and a half, you only have so many. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to, first of all, I'm not going to explore any new water until I've got, like, in my mind, like at least like 22, 23 pounds. Because if I want to be one of the leaders, I know I got to have at least that. And it turns out needed more than that, as it really turned out. But, and the reason why I say I explore new waters, because once you get to a certain weight that's really a contending type weight for the lead, and you have still more time in the day, well, then why not use that time to find new fish? Save the fish you still haven't gotten to yet for day 2, and then use that time to find new fish. So that's kind of the mentality. But I never really got in that position on day 1. As the day unfolded, oh my gosh, the day started so good on day 1, because literally in the first like 15 minutes, I had my 2 biggest fish that I weighed. One was like a 5.5, the other was like a 5. And then I had 2 other just keepers that I was hoping to call out. So it was a great start. Lost the fish, had him hooked for about a second, and he came off. But I had that great start with those 2 really nice bass on the weightless stickworm. But then this was just a crazy coincidence. So then I kind of fished through the area where I knew, but then there was also another area that was exactly the same, and I left it alone on purpose because I knew I was going to fish it anyways. But on a total coincidence, and it's crazy. This is really crazy because you got Lake Marion, which is a massive lake, and then you got the canal going on Lake Moultrie, which is a massive lake. Well, in this down, like 70 yards down the bank where there was other prime looking stuff that I hadn't even fished in practice, I just left it alone because what I had touched was so good. There was my Bridgeford Foods teammate, Brian Partek, fishing over there. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, well, at least it's him and not somebody else. So, but then, well, here's the other thing. So I talked to Brian, and we don't talk to each other about strategies or how we're catching them. We don't talk about strategy or nothing before the tournament. We don't discuss practices. For whatever reason, I don't know why, we just don't. And but after the tournament, we had kind of a long discussion. And had I known how he was fishing where he was, I would have gone right in behind him and probably made him start crying, because he was fishing a frog, and there was all these just wonderful little cypress sprouts and stuff that I'm sure there was some bedding fish and some of that stuff right in that area where he was fishing, and he was throwing a frog. But he did, to his credit, man, he made some adjustments, because he didn't catch him on the frog. He made some adjustments and caught him on other baits later in the day. And and here's the other thing: Brian and I have a little grudge match going, and we're keeping score who does better than who at each of these Bass Open tournaments. And it was 1-1 coming into this one. He won Okeechobee, I won Washita. In this tournament, he beat me by 1 ounce. 1 ounce he beat me by in this tournament. So Brian's got me 2-1 right now. Anyways, back to these cypress sprouts. So when I'm looking at cypress spawning trees, it can be any size tree can have a spawning bed. It can be one of the granddaddies with all the knees and everything, and all the hairy roots that are growing out of it. I mean, obviously those are huge fish attractors, but also it can be the little baseball bat size. Where the trunk comes out of the water, it's no bigger than a baseball bat or so. Those, I caught, like, that first morning, one of the 5-pounders I caught was off one of those types of trees. So, you cannot overlook those. They'll spawn right on that just as well as the granddaddy poppy type trees. So, but the little baseball bat type tree is not going to be the kind of tree where they're going to hang out post spawn or early pre-spawn. That's more for the bigger trees. Anyways, so let's go back. Let's get back to the day one morning. Now I got those 4. Well, then I fished till 9:30 in that same area, trying a bunch of new trees I hadn't hit, and also trying this one stretch of shoreline that was pretty good, but those fish were super shallow and they weren't necessarily spawning. I think those were just fish just moving in to warm in the afternoons, and that whole pattern fell apart. And I think that's what Brian was on with his frog, was that kind of was the same type of fish that I had found in practice in that area, but they weren't ready to go yet. Or whatever. I couldn't figure out what was going on there. So it got to be 9:30. I did catch one other fish off a tree, so I had 2 really nice ones and then 3 just average fish. So now I'm like, all right, I know these other areas that I checked out have there's tons of spawning beds. So I'm like, all right, it's time to cut loose out of this section of the lake. And then I went to another section of the lake. And I went there and I fished and I made little micro calls. I still have my 2 big ones, but I'm processing through my bottom 3 fish, calling ounces at a time, until where each one of those bottom 3 fish, bottom by meaning I had my 2 big ones and then these 3 smaller ones. I got to a point where they're all like around 3 1/4 poundish, right in there. And now it's late in the day. I still haven't caught another big one, and I'm kind of regretting leaving where I was, because that's where I had the 2 big bites. But I still had confidence. I'm like, man, there's got to be some quality females hanging around. I mean, they're coming in. Everything's right. The weather's right. It was calm. It was fairly calm. We had some sun. We had some kind of cloud. I mean, it was just right, and the water temperatures are right, and I'm like, I just got to keep working at this, and we'll get bites. We'll get them. So with about 30 minutes left of fishing time, because I had to do check-in time at 3 o'clock, I throw out one of those little tiny cypress trees. I mean, literally, it was like no more than 3 feet high out of the water. And the fish grabs it. I set the hook and I pull him up to the surface. She rolls and comes off. And it was like a 4-pounder. I was like, dang, I've been fishing freaking all day to finally get another good bite like that. And it just came off. So that was like, I was like, God damn, it sucked. But, let's figure this thing out. So with the limited time I had left, so now here I set a plan for that fish. I don't know if it was a big male, or if it was a female, don't know. But if it was a big male, a lot of times you can come back and catch that male. Even though you missed him the first time, you'll come back later and catch him. So I set up a little map through the trees that were around me. I'm like, okay, I'll set this course right here, make this circle, and with about 10 minutes left of fishing time, I'll be back at this fish and have another go at it. So I'm making the circle around, and I come to a big tree, a nice looking big tree, throw in there, set the hook on a fish, got the fish, he jumps, and it's like a 4-pounder. I'm like, all right, finally. And I got him away from the roots, because the roots have been a problem. Fish getting in the roots for some reason. And I get him away from the roots, and I got him clear, and I'm like, all right, now I'm just going to play him a little bit. I'm not going to hurry him. And all of a sudden, to my surprise, he's pinned he's found a stick below water that I couldn't see, and now he's pinned on it. And of course, before I get over to it, he leverages off the hook somehow, just tears it out because of the leverage they have when they're pinned like that. So now it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. One time sucked, 2 times absolutely freaking, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I really needed one of those 2, if not both, to to challenge for anything here. So you take a couple deep breaths and you look at the water ahead of you. Well, first you make a couple more casts at that same tree, because I didn't know if that was a big male. I didn't know if that was a female, but in case if it was a male, that means there would be a bigger female there. But I made more casts at the tree, nothing happened. But always, when you're throwing at suspected spawning beds, if you catch a fish, always make another cast there. Because you might be surprised at what you catch on the next cast there. Anyways, perfect example would be the old Bassmaster Mega Bucks back in '98, where I made the Mega Bucks finals. On the final qualifying day to get into the finals, I did exactly that. I caught like a 4.5 pound. This is on Old Hickory Lake by Nashville. I threw in there with a weightless stick worm, hooked a fish. It was like 4.5 pounder or so. Caught him. Threw right back to the same spot. Caught like another 4.5 to close to 5. So I'm pretty sure they were a spawning pair, because that's kind of what was going on there. Anyways, that was just a sidebar story. Just trying to emphasize why you throw back at the same tree when you think they're spawning. So now, back to my mindset of just, I can't believe this. This sucks. The universe is working against me. Now I'm starting to think about Sam Rayburn, my last tournament, where the first day of competition there, I lost my very 2 biggest fish in that tournament, a 7 pounder and a 5 pounder. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm thinking the universe just got something against me. It doesn't want me to excel. It wants me to do okay, but it doesn't want me to excel. I mean, seriously, this goes through my mind more every time this happens now. So I'm still going on the circle, going back. I want to get back to that fish that I lost earlier. And I come to another tree, get a bite. I pull back on it, and holy crap. My line, this fish just took my rod and just damn near pulled it out of my hands. And I'm pulling back, and I'm like giving it. I mean, it's pulling hard. Like my lines could break. It's 12-pound fluorocarbon, and it's really strong by Gamma. But I'm like, I don't want this to break. Plus, it's rubby. Well, I don't know that yet. But then I'm like, oh shit! It's like pinned in. Now it's pinned in something. I'm like, oh man, I'm on a root or something's going on here. What's going to happen this time? How am I going to lose it this time? What are these roots going to do to me? Well, all of a sudden, the line pops off of whatever root or stick it was on. The line didn't break. It just, all of a sudden, it pops off of there. It was below water. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And then I start reeling fast, and I realize that, the line didn't break, but now I'm having to catch up to the fish, because literally the fish was like 25 feet to my right from where I made the cast. But I finally catch up to it, and then I start pulling on it, and in my mind I'm like, all right, we're gonna play this fish really firm, because we don't want him to find a hidden stick like happened like 10 minutes ago. And so I start pulling on him, and he gets to the surface, and she starts thrashing, and it's absolute monster. A second later, the freaking hook just comes out. I dang near felt like it broke my fishing soul right there. It just broke me, and it literally broke me, because it's like almost confirmation that the universe is just destined to take away any high finish potential from me. And it was just a total heartbreak. I've lost big fish before, but this was just a heartbreaker after the previous two incidents within the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it was. But what do you do, right? So can't change it. So anyways, I complete the circle back to that original lost fish. I don't get any bites. It's time to go in. I check in. 20 pounds, 6 ounces is what I got. I was seething mad at this misfortune. I mean, yeah, 20, people congratulate you for 20 pounds, 6 ounces, and you say thank you, but underneath, man, I'm just seething mad at just the circumstances of what was dealt to me. It's like, it was just, I just couldn't believe what was dealt to me. It was just, my gosh, just, I'm still mad about it, but I'm over it for the most part. It'll be a memorable sequence of events until I die, for sure. It's one of those memorable sequences of fishing. If you fish a lot yourself, you probably have a good handful of them yourself. And wow, what a just, I mean, it's the complete opposite of the last minute heroic. It's the last minute freaking gut punch and kick to the nuts. That's what it is. Oh, so 20 pounds. So yeah. So that was that day one. Day two. Well, you know what kind of got me over it was I got my camping neighbors who I just met this trip. Very nice people. Their names are Scott and Laura. They invited me over for dinner with other people, other campers, and it was just nice to hang out with some people. And I got over it. I mean, it'll always be the sequence of unfortunate fish losses, but that just bitterness and pissed offness was past. And they served us a great dinner, great company, and I was much more at ease by the time I went to bed. Let's talk about day two now. How did I catch my 21 pounds and whatever ounces it was? Well, I decided that I was going to go straight to that area where I had that unfortunate sequence. That was going to be my plan. I was going to skip the area where I started day one. I was just going to skip that altogether because I didn't know if that area was going to reload those good trees that I caught. I didn't know. But in this other area, there's still a lot of water and I never even got to. So I'm like, I'm going to go over there and do all that water, and there's a bunch of it I didn't even touch. And plus, it didn't seem like there was too much fishing pressure over there, which was about to change. So I go there, and it wasn't long. I started putting some fish in the boat, and they're small ones. And then eventually I came to the small cypress where I lost that 4-pounder, the first 4-pounder. Nothing. Didn't catch nothing. Then I came around to the tree where I lost the second 4-pounder. I caught a male. So I'm like, well, at least I got this male. Males are smaller than females. So it was like, I don't know, maybe a 3-pound female. And then I come over to the tree where I lost the magnum. And sure enough, I hook a fish. And I'm freaking jacked. And it was a good one, but it wasn't the magnum. But it was my biggest fish of the day. It was the male that was spawning with that magnum fish, and this male was my biggest fish of the day, and it was probably a little over 5 pounds. So if that gives you anything, if you've bass fished enough, you know that the big males are always with the biggest females. So males are always smaller than females, but a 5 pound male bass is not going to spawn with like a 2.5 pound female. It doesn't work that way. The biggest males, they are with the biggest females. So this is a 5 pound male is a huge male. And that just, I know I was dealing with like a 7 pounder or better female that previous day easily. I mean, seven's probably being conservative. I got to look at it, but not the perfect look at it, if you know what I mean. So anyways, I got that quality fish, and the rest of the day just plays out. I lost a couple fish along the way, but I caught a lot. I caught a lot of fish, quite a few. I had some lulls. I was exploring. I played out the water that I had found in practice, and for the pretty much second half of the day, I was just doing new stuff, new water, stuff that looked good, stuff that had potential. And by the way, the fishing pressure in this area was higher now. Some other people showed up. I don't know if they were there early in the morning the first day and then left, or if this was like their number 2 spot they didn't get to from day one. For whatever reason. And so I was just trying to move my boat into areas where I was paying attention to where they weren't fishing, places that didn't get hit yet. And that's kind of how I played it the rest of the day. And I hit some serious lulls where not much was happening, in fact, but I did score. During one of these lulls, I got into this backwater area, and not much was going on at all. I mean, there was a lot of decent looking stuff, but it was kind of decent looking, but kind of not. And I caught a small keeper that didn't help any. I'm like, I'll just play this out. We'll see. I mean, we'll just see what happens. And just not much was happening. And then, boom, I caught like a 4.5 pounder. And this was out of a big area. There was like nothing in this big area except for that 4.5 pounder and that smaller keeper I caught. So spent a lot of time and effort, but thank goodness I got that bite out of that area. Well, then it came out of there, and then I probably had, oh gosh, after we were done with that area, probably 40 minutes of fishing time left. And so I'm like, okay, so then I came to this other area that I hadn't fished yet, and I hadn't seen nobody fishing it. And my co-angler, who, thank you, very, very courteous co-angler. He was never trying to cast at the trees before I did. He was never casting at the same tree. If I already casted that tree, he wasn't like casting his lure like 6 feet from mine. So Chip's his name. Thank you so much for being that type of co-angler that you don't put any pressure on the pro. The pro doesn't feel in a hurry at all when fishing with you, Chip. So really appreciate that. But I mean, because of his courteousness, he was there, and he told me he's like, hey, I just want to have fun, learn something, take away something from this experience, and I hope he did. But he finally, so when we went to this new area, he was the first one to catch one there, and that was his first keeper. And like I said, the whole key was these trees. So the first one thrown at these trees is going to catch the fish most of the time. So I got into this area, and I was kind of rushing through it, which is a good way It's what you want to do when you're trying to find one of these micro sweet spots that I mentioned earlier in the video. You want to you don't want to cast at every single tree. You want to move, cast at this tree, then maybe skip one, cast at another tree, and not make multiple casts at the same tree until you finally catch one. Then if you catch one, then there's potential that you're in one of those micro groupings of spawners, and then you start working on every tree with multiple casts to see how it plays out. Well, he caught that one, and then it wasn't much later than I caught a fish that called up. It wasn't a big call, but it was a call. It was a call to where I'm feeling like, hey, I've got to be around 20 pounds by now, or close to it. And then short bit after that, I caught probably it was my second biggest fish. So my biggest one was like that 5-pound male, 5.25-pound male. This fish was probably like a 4 3/4 to 5-pounder, and that fish tore me up, but I got him. And so then we kept working the area. I caught a couple more fish, and then it was time to go. And so we had to make the run back, and I weighed 21 pounds and some ounces. The rod that I use for this type of fishing, I had to beef up I like to use spinning rods to skip the weightless worm underneath the little cypress branches and that. With the weightless worm, to me, I'm not good at casting weightless worms with bait casters, so I use the spinning. And I set up my spinning rod heavier than normal. So I got 12-pound fluorocarbon, no braid. That's personal choice. I'm kind of second guessing that. I've been doing that for years. I often second guess myself because a lot of people ask me, when they ask me, they're like, you use all fluorocarbon? How do you not get all these coils and all that problem and the stuff jumping off the spool? I'm like, yeah, that happens to me too. But I'm good at dealing with it. I'm good at, when it does happen, I'm good at getting the knots out. But it's wasted time, right? Getting those knots out. Sometimes it takes freaking 5 minutes. So, anyways, so I'm using that. Uh-oh. Did this just shut off on me? No, it's still running. Okay. All right. It may, I don't know what my camera just did, but anyhow, we're going to keep rolling. So I'm using that 12-pound gamma fluorocarbon, which is really freaking tough line. I've been using it since 2006. Love it. And I'm using it's a Fluger spinning reel. They're 4000 series, which means it's a big spool, large diameter spool, which helps with that coiling, because you don't want to put 12-pound fluorocarbon on a little tiny spinning reel where the diameter of the spool is much tighter, because that's just going to be a nightmare. So I used the 4000, and then I put that on a medium rod, but it's a medium spinning rod that by other manufacturers it might, I don't know if it'd be a medium heavy. It's a stiffer medium rod than a lot of other manufacturers' medium rods, which and that's a little heavier than that rod's little heavier than what I skip like docks with. But this setup, with all the wood rods around these cypress trees and hidden sticks and all that, I just felt like you didn't have the opportunity to really set the hook and then just let the fish swim around until he tires out and then you land him. You couldn't do that, because I can't tell you how many times I feel the bite on the cypress and I just start reeling back on him. He'd already have me around a cypress knee or a root of some kind, and then it was like, holy crap, what's going on here? What's going to happen here this time? So, and I made sure to try to play, especially after that one pinned me on that stick. I played these fish I laid into them good because I wanted them free and clear of the crap, and only, and that might have been why I lost that Magnum, because I wasn't messing around after that previous fish pinned me on that stick. When I was starting to lay off them a little bit, I wasn't going to mess around with this. I mean, I was going to get this fish close to the boat where I could keep him near the surface and keep pressure on him. And first opportunity, land the son of a gun. But anyhow, so that's it. That's how that tournament played out for me. That's how it went down. How would I have done things different? I don't know. I don't mind how my strategy played out. I don't mind how I did the practice strategy, and I don't mind how I picked my areas to fish in the tournament. Yeah, I really don't. I just, just didn't get enough of the big bites. So it'll be interesting to follow the reports on this tournament from the top finishers, see how they did. One pattern that I never really explored much was I did make it down to Lake Moultrie the third practice day, and because I wanted to check the water clarity down there to see if there was going to be any visual sight fishing going on, and the water I checked was all cloudy and murky, so you couldn't see nothing. So I ended up fishing for a couple hours at the end of the day, just cranking the hydrilla that I found, and I caught a 6-pounder. The only fish I caught was a big one, and that was one pattern I never really went back to, never really explored, because that was day 3, and day 4 was my dedication to the shallows at that point. And that was a tough decision, because in my mind I'm like, man, I caught a 6-pounder in the grass. Excuse me, something I really like to do on a crankbait. And I'm just like, I'd really love to explore that, but I really believe the shallow bites. At that point, it was more important to me to just stay in Marion and really try to unfold a shallow bite of some kind, because I just felt like those water temperatures it was just getting too right, and so I'm happy with that. I still wonder what would happen if I went to crank more of that hydrilla down there, but like I said, in 2 hours I had one bite. It was a 6-pounder. Okay, but one bite in 2 hours, so that means in an 8-hour tournament, at that rate, in an 8-hour tournament, you're gonna have 4 bites. That is not good enough. If they're all, you might say, well, what if they're all 6-pounders? Well, I'm still, they don't even have a limit, right? And they're not all going to be 6-pounders. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That's not going to happen. So, anyhow, but the thing of it is that was just some grass. I mean, that was just some random grass. I just decided to start cranking. What if I would have got into the right area where there was like more fish, right? So that played into my mind too. It's like, the night before, as I was trying to decide what to do for day 4, that was playing in my mind too. I'm like, well, what if I go crank some, find the right ditch with grass and there's like all kinds of fish hanging out and that sort of thing. But for whatever reason, I ditched that plan and scrapped it and never went back to it. So, all right, that's all I got to say about this tournament. Thanks for watching. If you're still with me, thanks for listening in. And hey, go out and come down to this lake. Holy cow! I've heard that it gets to be a little tougher once the fish are done spawning. They get into places where you just don't have catches quite like this. But Man, what a place to fish this time of year. Holy cow. A lot of nice quality 4 to 5 pound fish out here, and bigger. You know, there's 8 pounders. There's even 10 pounders swimming out here. Probably not too many, but in that Bass Pro Tour tournament, I think David Dudley had like a, or wait, there were two of them that were like almost 10 pounds. Dudley had one, and somebody beat him like by an ounce for big bass. I think that's what went down. All right, I could go on, but this is long enough, and actually I got to pack up and move on. So thanks for watching. Over.